you know, you did vote, right? Well, no.
You know, that happens a lot. People
I mean,
think,
yeah,
this is gonna go, so we're not gonna go vote,
Exactly.
especially in a special
The
election.
the other item that we've considered is we were on a ballot with a number of other measures, and sad commentary, the mindset is, no, 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 I don't want to, you know, I'm guilty of that if I haven't had time to study everything when I lived down in the Bay Area. Up here it's easier, you know what's happening, but, so,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think the ballot measure was close enough that I think it may be worthy of another try, and the reason I say that is the dynamics might be a little bit different between a walk-in election versus a special mail ballot. I don't think the cost of a mail election is going to be too extreme. I'd hate to hazard a guess without the clerk.
I think
here, but-
Susan River Fire District did an all-mail ballot. They didn't do it through the clerk's office. I think they wound up hiring, let's say, Teresa Nagel, and they did it was a formal election, and I think I want to say they spent maybe $7,000 covering all you have to print the ballots and postage on them and the works. I mean, but I think it was well under $10,000, if I recall, and that was like about 3 or 4 years ago now. And
my point is maybe with a slightly different message and a slightly different method of conducting the election, maybe you'd get enough of a different result.
I think it's worth a try.
I think we owe it to the people up there, of course, we owe it, we owe it big time. I'm
We
in
need to
support,
get-
I
we
just
need-
want it to be successful,
no, I understand, and I appreciate your observations, you know.
We,
because
we
those are
need
things
to
we
get
hear.
something in place, because until we do, all of us, everybody in this room is at risk for the fact that we have the.
That's a good point. That's very true. And I've always said the eminence provider in Susanville, Sept, is not only for the people, it is also for the people passing.
Passing through, and a fair share of their business that they wind up billing is for people passing through the area. But the key is that you gotta be there to take care of the need when the need arises.
So during the time we did the whole RFP, you guys said, no, we're good, we don't need to be in it, but had you not been good, I mean, we would have RFP'd the
Well,
whole thing.
you're way before my time, I'm not even sure, you're talking about the previous. sense of
Initially, yeah,
contract.
like you said,
10
that
years
you
ago.
guys.
At least 10 years ago.
But I mean,
You're way before my time.
it just seems like, certain areas of the county were discriminated against, because.
No, because at that time, Brian was the supervisor, and he made it clear, we got a good unit up there with working efficiency. I'm not sure without a.
Yeah, no, now, at the time.
But since then, they lost that, and that's the difference,
But right now, I'm saying.
but
we are-
Well,
right now, if
MoDOT
you included the
MoDOT took the school money to pay the healthcare bill, and that's when they lost it.
in MoDOC, right. But if
So where are we?
if we were to form a new RFP and include you guys in it, I don't know that Sept would even bid on it. No, I'm not, Larry, I'm not for sure.
Well,
Without supplying the subsidies.
Right.
So what's our move? Is the county gonna fund the election, the special elections? I believe we should,
I agree.
you know.
I don't think it's a huge cost, man.
Just because it could save the county hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's worth
Well,
the
if-
$7,000, $10,000 shot to
If
fund
the
it.
election, if the election, Mr. Chairman, would be under $10,000, and I would believe it would be, and that's with the entire population, and that was shared with MoDOC County, so you're not talking about a huge amount of money.
But the observation also is MoDOT County's gotta support us.
Yeah, this is outside my expertise, but I'm assuming that the MoDOC County clerk would conduct the
MoDOT
election
stuff,
for
yeah.
MoDOC people, and Lassen County clerk would conduct
that's,
the election for that issue.
It's not, going back to the Susan River Fire District, it's not required that the election, there's, the election process, the procedures to do it don't change, because that's set by law, how you do the ballots and stuff. But it's not required that the county clerk itself, that office, conduct the election. So if there's an entity outside of either the MoDOC clerk or the Lassen County Clerk's office that would contract with the quote district to conduct the election, they could do that. I mean, just like Susan River Fire District did, and it met all the requirements that the law had for how the election and how the ballots are counted and the like. but it was not conducted, that election was not conducted by the Lassen County Clerk's Office.
Well, doesn't the clerk have to certify the votes?
I'd like to get some professional opinion from the clerk.
Can you get the Modoc paper and the Modoc radio stations to support this effort?
The Susanville City Clerk,
They have.
We did,
They
yeah.
have?
Historically,
Very
yeah.
strongly.
Very strong.
And I think it's really critical that you guys have that in your
This is
pocket.
my secretary. Let me listen.
I don't want to talk over everybody, but the difference in the results of the election were like 3 or 4 percentage points. I mean,
Right.
it wasn't that MODOC didn't support it. In fact, in the two election precincts in MODOC, the district formation overwhelmingly passed. The two measures, so the second measure, the tax measure in the two Lookout and Eden district on MODOC County side was about 60% versus in Beaver and the area where Aaron lives out there, the Providence, there's 2 consolidated districts. They actually passed it by 3 votes. The Madeline area, which did not pass it, and there's about 16 voters, I think, that actually voted, about 30 registered on Day Road that didn't pass it. So the distinction between the 2 counties in terms of support is not near as black as white as it sounded
like.
here, right? It really isn't. And remember that, my name's Dan Bouse, by the way, I'm sorry.
How do you spell your last name?
B-O-U-S-E.
Thanks.
I'm a member of the committee, and I actually ran the ambulances in the Modoc County side for about 5 years. Anyway, I think the other point that's important is that even though, and I appreciate what Jim's saying, but getting back to the point you made, in terms of stationing an ambulance, what you want to do is put it in the population center. If we put it out on the edge, then the reality is there's other ambulances that are going to be as close that will eat off of that population fringe and actually take runs away from that 4th
Well,
ambulance.
the purpose, what I was suggesting if we did something at Grasshopper, is that the ambulance would not be based exclusively for the purpose of North County. If we're gonna have to try to come up with an economic model to support it, that Grasshopper one would, right now, there's accidents that happen at Eagle Lake, there's calls to Eagle Lake. It takes 40 minutes to run from Susanville out to Eagle Lake, so you cut down some of the, pretty much everything north of Susanville, north of Antelope Grade, is right now really kind of underserved that way. So by having that 4th ambulance there would allow that to have improved coverage, and then if there was a need, if the Susanville ambulance had to shift down to Milford because of some big accident, let's say maybe down in Hurlong or Doyle, then right now Westwood would shift over to kind of cover Susanville, but if Westwood's tied up, Susanville would have an additional backup, so that ambulance would be designed to kind of slide back and forth, because population-wise, it probably is going to have a lot more business down here necessarily than it would have up there. But by being located in that spot, it would make it a lot faster, easier to get into Big Valley and provide service that otherwise is uncovered. That was the rationale behind it. But if we could come up with a model where we could base it in Big Valley, where it would provide service into Modoc and even Shasta County, and provide enough coverage to be, cost to cover that, then it makes a lot of sense to do. That would be the preferred option. But if we can't do that, and we're going to subsidize something, I think we're going to have to subsidize something that's going to be beneficial to a larger group here in Lassen County. But if I can make one additional comment, you mentioned Madeline. I didn't even think about that. But on my phone last week, it was Wednesday, on my home phone, I had a voicemail left, and I meant to pass this on to Tom, and I apologize, but P.O. Cantrell, Pat Cantrell, called and left this message from Likely. She's involved with the Likely Fire Department, and she wanted me to know, and I have a feeling it was based on the discussion from last week's meeting here, but she wanted me to know and to pass on to the rest of you that at their board meeting or fire district meeting Tuesday evening last week, they, I guess, discussed their providing service into Lassen County, where she's famous for coming down here to the podium and tell us how she responds all the way down. They come down to the horse corral on 395. But they have voted now to cease doing any service into the Madeline, down to Ravendale, over to Blue Lake. I mean, the whole corridor there, so anything south of the Modoc County line likely, and it was because, I guess, the monies that we had talked about from the Madeline Fire District, you know, being that they weren't functioning as a fire department, and we have that assessment there that comes in off the property tax for that was going to be supposedly contracted to give to the likely department so that they could have fire and emergency service, ambulance type service in that part of Lassen County. I guess that's not coming forward. I think, Richard, you said to me that that's being used to pay for something else now, and as a result, they basically are declining to provide any service at all across the county line over to Cedarville side as well as over towards that direction. So that just complicates the matter even further. And I'm sure those voters that voted in the Madeline area on the tax question were voting with that probably as a bias in the background.
How much is that, Richard?
I'm sorry,
How much money was that?
that they were,
They were saying.
Was it,
Madeline
You probably
was it
don't know
about
off the top of
9,000,
your head.
7,000?
yeah, it wasn't.
It was like around 7,000 or between 7
And it
and
was from
10,000.
the Madeline Fire District to
Property tax.
Likely Fire District. And they both agreed that the Likely was not going to respond to the Lassen County any longer. Eric knows the details.
I mean, just the Cliff Notes version, I don't want to get off topic here, but essentially it was a decision between both boards, and it was a financially motivated decision not to enter into that agreement. Essentially, Madeline had some unforeseen expenses, and it drew down their coffers, and they will not be able to have money in reserve to pay Likely. So the agreement they had in place, the draft agreement was on a per-call basis, it wasn't a monthly fee per se, so it was a dynamic figure, I guess. It could be zero for the year, it might be 3,000. So it was a mutually agreed upon decision based on what I've been able to find out.
And it's slightly different service that we're talking about. These are just first responders.
Right, this has nothing to do directly with ambulance, but it has to deal with the medics on paramedics. And the tone of Pat's voice was, you know, you're not gonna pay us, so therefore we're not going to, you know, and it was Lassen County's responsibility in her opinion, and she's expressed that at the podium numerous times. So she's not on the board of supervisors any longer, but she still is active in that fire district. That's where she lives, and her heart's big, but, she just made it real clear that she wasn't very happy that we weren't gonna pay them any money. So, thanks for letting me know. I'm not there.
I think
Pass the message
there's a
on.
couple of points where these two issues intertwine, and I think one of the things that Eric and I have been talking about in the hallway is that there actually is a precedent being set with them doing that, because when you look around us, many of the ambulances, we'll take SIMSA for example, is now responding out of Zone 1 into our area because there's no ambulance there. Mayor's is doing it, MODOC's doing it, however, we apparently had an incident, and one of the things I would like to see, and Eric and I are discussing how to do that, but I think some direction from this board would help. We're starting to see things unraveling where potentially an ambulance provider did refuse to respond to a call in our area. And one of the problems we're having as a committee is we're just a bunch of volunteers. I don't have the authority to walk in and look at people's CHP dispatch logs, which they're required by law to have as an ambulance provider, and see if indeed that did happen. But as this issue drags on in our area, I'm worried that we are wearing out our good neighbor policy, if you will. When we're dragging Bernie to New Beaver, we're uncovering hundreds of square miles when that ambulance moves from Bernie to New Beaver. And now you have, not on the ambulance side, but on the fire side, you have an ambulance or a fire district that's saying, we are not going to respond outside of our district. That sets a hell of a precedent when you think about it. And it's worrisome to me that that's starting to go on. And I guess what we're asking is, we'd like to see some monitoring going on that, from an official capacity, whether that be NorCal or your EMCC committee has been fabulous to work with, whoever that is, to start looking at some of these issues, because it just seems like the EMS portion, both on the fire side and on the ambulance provider side, is gotten just a little bit more tenuous. And I don't want to belabor it all day, but we're asking for help, because like, we're just a volunteer group. I don't have the authority, even though the Sheriff's Office in Alturas has been fabulous. They've actually provided me dispatch logs when the initial dispatch came from them. But we're talking 5 different dispatch centers that have some that are a player in this thing as they try to cover our area. And I think we need to have somebody looking at this the overall issue and seeing if we can do some interim fixes. And again, I'm worried about the precedent of what is taking place just to the north of us.
Yeah.
Richard?
Sure. I had just a couple of suggestions maybe to move this along a little bit. And I'd be happy to work with Eric and NorCal EMS to explore this issue of people refusing to provide service and find out what role we have, what role NorCal EMS has, et cetera, and report back to the board. The other thing that I would suggest is that we try to quantify the cost of an election, and I could also explore with Modoc County their interest in sharing, pro rata the cost of that, or conducting separate elections, and maybe get us some better numbers to move forward with that. Those are the 2 things I think we could do now.
Can I make a comment? I agree. We need to know the cost, we need to come and decide as a board. I'm supportive, but we also need to know the cost to get your message out. Because if you go do this thing again, it's just gonna fail if you don't get the message out.
Right.
And your message needs to have some statistics. I mean, how many fatalities have there been in that area? Like, things like that, because of lack of service, Some of the negative consequences that have happened, $65 tax. I mean, ask people, what's your kid's life worth? Is it worth $65, I mean, put it in their face. Don't just have a special election and lose again.
Right.
Have a special election and win. And so we need to know, not just the cost of the election, the cost to get out the message. And I can't believe those kind of messages would have been out in the educational thing you did. Maybe you did. You list the fatalities, list all those things, list the consequences, and put that message right and clear. Where do your kids live?
On that point, I think that
I
the
don't see how
cost,
people can vote no to that.
the costs are real, and once you get an ambulance or a service in place, there's still costs associated, and that's just to get them there and get you to wherever you have to go. But when you get the bill for the ambulance ride, and when you get the bill for the helicopter ride, your insurance will cover so much of that, and then the rest of it, you're on the hook out of pocket. And one thing I know SIMSA has done, and Mountain Lifeline has done, and CareFlight does as well, is they hustle kind of like a membership program where you pay, and it's like, in a lot of cases, like $65 or $75, but when you add all 3 of them together, it's between $150 to $200 a year. But if you're smart, you sign up for them all, because when you get that bill, and I've seen that bill because I've gotten one, and it's like $27,000, and your insurance is only going to cover $22,000 of it. You're on the hook for that other $5,000, and if you happen to be a member, they've got it set up so they basically covered that cost. So, when you talk about $65 to just get the thing set up, there's costs, healthcare costs beyond that I think people have to realize the significance of it, and that has to be part of that education program. Because if you get, like, if we wind up putting a SIMSA one up there and it's supported by that, they're going to be smart in wanting to pay another $65, whatever it is, to be part of that program, because otherwise you might get a bill for $5,000, and you think you had a heart attack going over there, you'll get a heart attack when you get home.
So the discussion of possible direction of staff, I think, yeah, okay.
We
were talking about, and I was the one that brought it up, you know, was to eliminate the kill calls, because that way there, if you have an entity there, that's the working group, you know, per se, they can go out and get grants to help promote this, get it going, et cetera, and I mean, so why, is that, if you take out the kill clause, or you leave it in, I mean, what's your basis and reasoning behind that, Bob? Or what's your thought on the kill clause, as far as removing it, if we put it to the vote again, to leave it in, or take it out, or leave it as two separate entities, so if the tax measure fails, well then,
Well, it's a choice that you can go either direction. If your desire is to, if tax doesn't pass, still have a district in formation to do just the things that you suggest, then perhaps, and it's a choice on the part of those advancing the effort in the first place, would be to not include a kill clause.
In 1992, we did that here with the Lassen Hospital District was formed, and it was voted on by the people. This tax assessment that went with it failed, but there was not a kill clause, and that district today still exists. It's on the books, it's dormant, it's inactive, there's no board, but there's an entity that's there. The reason why there hasn't been any effort to do anything with it, because within about 4 years of that particular action, Banner Lassen, those folks took over the hospital operations from the St. Mary's folks that were in place at the time, and the purpose of setting up this district was to create a local entity that St. Mary's could transfer the hospital activity to. And when Banner stepped forward and took over from St. Mary's, you know, they've carried it and they've built the new hospital and they've operated. So there isn't a need for it, but the district still exists on paper. And so you can create districts like that. LAFCO isn't too keen about creating paper tigers, but if you start a process, and that's where, unfortunately, with the kill clause in this vote in June, is if that hadn't been in place, even though the tax measure failed, at least you would have had an entity that would have been created, that would have had directors, that, so that Dan, instead of being the private guy volunteering, would actually have some standing and some skin in the game and be able to, you know, try another method to put it together. So I would be in favor, if we are going to pursue a special election type thing, that we try to create something without a kill clause, so that we have an entity that we can negotiate with, that the county can provide, you know, here is, you know, financial support as a contribution, as a percentage share, whatever the cost is. We have a legal entity to deal with. Right now, we don't have anybody to deal with, and it's sitting there. And that's the balance.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
There may be a few arguments against the formation of a district that doesn't have any revenue source, because I think there are fixed obligations of a community services district, whether that be conducting an annual audit or various reporting requirements to the state controller's office and so forth. So there could be some fixed expenses associated with an entity that doesn't have any revenue at all. And that may be why the kill clause was put in there. Totally sure.
Maybe we just need answers to that type of stuff. Cost for the election, how are you gonna market it, cost to market it, get moving, so.
Okay.
There was a lady in the back had her hand up. I'm gonna take some public comment now, then we're gonna move on. So
Okay.
you need more questions of the board? Thank you. Good luck, yeah.
Nice presentation.
Okay, we'll take other members of the public. Do you have anything to say on this? Yes, just state your name for the tape, please.
Kimberly Brady. And back in 2012, you forced a fire, emergency fire tax on the residents in the county. Couldn't that be done here? Why put it to a vote? It's something necessary. You did it on the fire tax and nobody's done the obligations that was to go with that, you know, such as clearing out the fire breaks for the widows. I mean, why keep voting when it needs to be done?
I think there's some confusion between the county and the state here. In 2012, the state imposed something that they call a fee. I tend to agree that it's a tax, but the state responsibility area
That was not done by the county.
The county.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, it had absolutely nothing to do with the county.
But it was paid to the county.
No.
No.
My grandma, it didn't, the envelope was the county. The
No,
return envelope came
if
here.
it's the state responsibility area fee, which I think it is, it would go directly to the state.
It wasn't a state envelope, I saw it.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
not
I
aware of
mailed
any
it for
tax
her.
that the
I
county's
was shocked.
imposed in 2012.
That wasn't you.
No.
Okay. Well, could the state step in and do something here?
Uh,
If all the counties got together, we could.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I just want to see them have an ambulance. These people have been without an ambulance far
That's an
too
idea,
long.
maybe we can petition the Jefferson State folks.
Is there any other public comment? Yes, I just state your name, please.
Yes, my name is Sheila Connor, and I'm part of the volunteer committee trying to get our ambulance together. And you know, I've always been told, if at first you don't succeed, try again. We see our weaknesses, and just to let you know, that's where we're gonna put our strength. We're just gonna try and communicate better with those that we know are opposed. And whereas, you know, we were waiting for them to come to us, really, but that faction is a little difficult. So we're just gonna go to them and some of the other areas who just are kind of unaware of the situation, that's what we're gonna put our strong efforts towards. Because we only had a few people really that were opposed to it, and I think that was either those who were opposed because of previous issues or those who were just ignorant of the situation.
Thank you, Sheila. And I agree with your, you know, if you don't succeed, keep at it, and I think you'll be successful. You learn from the past failures and get it right, and I'm sure, and I'm happy to help if Aaron, anything I can do to help with your think tanks, whatever.
Well, I think it was a good discussion we had here today, that it helped the working group out and helped me.
I think we covered a lot of ground, and we identified a variety of potential solutions, so hopefully something can come out of this.
Is there any other public comment?
If I could just reemphasize one point, I'll look at Richard because when we deal with NorCal or the MCC, I think Chairman Watson, you hit on a really important point about how many deaths have there been, how many people have been at risk. We need some official help. The way we get that information now is either in the paper, front page of the paper, which is what happened last week in terms of the ambulance breaking down and there was a long wait and the helicopter had to be, it was ugly. And that made the front page paper, but there's a lot of these other incidents. We're just hearing about them anecdotally, and so if we could just get some official help on gathering that information, I think it would be helpful for everybody.
And the fact that, big and bold, we are now being, you know, denied service. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that get
It's
people
scary
to spend their
stuff.
65 bucks.
And I just want to thank you guys. I appreciate all the time you've spent with us the last 6-8 months on this issue. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything for Aaron?
Mr. Chairman, just one last comment and thought, you know, maybe this is something Richard can take back too, because we have a very active economic development committee that, you know, meeting the LADC, and we look at one of the things that has been defined in our plan that we had done, the one that was adopted.
The SEDS.
The SEDS report, in which identified for Lassen County, and last time I checked, Big Valley is part of Lassen County, is the recreation tourism is one of the areas to highly promote in terms of getting people to come and recreate in our backyard. I mean, we're talking about a 200-mile radius around, and we got to identify there's like, you know, 2.7 million people, or how many people it is, and out of that to try to get our share of people who want to go out and recreate, whether it's in the lakes or hiking in the mountains or doing whatever it is that they want to do to recreate. Hang gliding, they may want to hang glide off a Big Valley Mountain, who knows, but recreating when you're doing that is, you know, by its very nature, has hazards, and hazards leads to accident, and accidents, so yeah, invite people to come and recreate and be up in an area of the county where we have no services, so if something happens. So I think that really does a lot to, you don't wanna let the people know that, hey, if you come here, you're coming here at your own risk. So these all pieces fit together, and I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we try to come up with a solution, that there is that obligation, and I think it's not lost on this board.